Um, Seven specialises in large-scale project management, and we've been involved and currently involved in a couple of major IT transformations with some fairly significant clients. What I want to share with you today is some pretty basic learning. So from not talking about disruption, but actually talking about what disruption does to organisations, if that makes sense. Is that reasonable? Bit dirty, a bit pragmatic. We define speed to value, which is the biggest topic that our clients are facing. I had a conversation with the CIO yesterday about speed to value, and I'm going to divert before I get to this. Luke talked about paradox, and I couldn't help it, it came into my head. Here's a definition of paradox. IT has been probably one of the smallest groups in organisations and the longest to track costs. I've not worked in an IT group where they haven't got really meticulous financial systems. And the paradox, of course, is we're now seen as too expensive. I'm happy to be too subtle for this early in the morning. All right. Try and figure out how much time business spends on projects. Try and find out how much business spends on maintaining systems after they've gone live, and you understand the paradox. So the big challenge for many CIOs is a perception that we're too slow. Forget disruption. We're just too slow and we cost too much. And ultimately what Seven's interested in is how do we help CIOs and their business partners fundamentally change how you deliver. And there's a story around this woman who was walking down the street, and she came across this man searching under a lamppost on the ground looking for stuff, and the woman says, "Can I help you?" And he says, "Yes, I've lost the keys to my house." And she says, "Oh, that's no good, let me help you." And after about 15 minutes of looking around, she says, "Look, I can't see the keys. Where did you lose them?" And the man points over into the darkness and says, "I lost them over there." She says, "Why are we looking here?" And of course, he says, "There's more light." And that's what we see. Everyone's into agile, everyone's into continuous development. I gave my first agile conference 15 years ago, by the way. So it's taken 15 years for agile to become the new black. And it's not the answer. It's only part of the answer. You want to get truly into speed to value. There are three levers. The first lever is what we're calling, in a broader sense, organisational agility. It includes project agility, but it goes beyond that. Surprisingly, if you're going to prove that you're getting more agile, you've got to be able to measure that and convince people. And I want to come back to that. The most unexplored area of transformation is the measurement of it. Okay, so we've got to have a balanced approach to getting not only the organisation more agile, but proof that that's happened. And more importantly, proof that that's added value, which is the benefits management area as well. So if we look at it, and we're not going to obviously in the 20 minutes we've got cover all of this. I'm going to focus on governance and sponsorship. Then I'm going to hand to Declan to talk about some of the stuff that Seven's been doing in detailed measurement and actually helping CIOs and C-level folks understand what is actually happening in projects and their costs. And then I'll finish off with the hardest problem of the lot, which is the real measurement of benefits. I've just come out of a 12-month consult trying to help a client figure out what they got from their $1 billion a year on IT. And after 40 years, I can tell you that was the hardest journey I've ever had. Okay, let's look at governance and sponsorship. Fundamental to actually delivering change faster and getting to value faster is the whole challenge around executive engagement. Full stop, all right? I've taught 7,000 PMs in my career. You want to get a PM upset, ask them about their sponsor. Sorry, yeah, if you understand what I mean. I don't do it deliberately. If they really annoy me, I'll say, "How's your sponsor going?" Right? We talk about it and no one does anything about it. I've seen 3 generations of sponsors get no better. In fact, I've seen it worse. They've learnt all the bad shit from the other 2 generations. That makes sense? So they don't believe any business cases. They expect to be ambushed. And we tolerate that and then say, why can't we get good sponsors? So let me move that on. Challenge. This is really interesting. Down at the bottom, you've got a PM doing incredibly good agile stuff. You know, continuous development and sprints. Sitting above that person is layers and layers of reporting and layers of folks looking over their shoulders. These figures, by the way, are real figures. The client I just came from, it was an average 4 to 6 weeks to get a message from the PM to the real sponsor. I mean, they sent them emails, but of course they're too busy to read that. Then you had a PMO sitting on the other side demanding other data that went up through another total loop. Does this sound at all familiar to anyone? Right? And you actually compare both sets of data and they're not the same anyhow. Most PMs spend at least 1/3 of their working life just doing reporting. Not adding value, not generating value quicker, but just reporting. And most really disappointing is most of the execs don't read it. So, in our major client that I've just come out of, we did some pretty radical stuff. We're about to do some of this with Luke and Qantas. We abolished steering committees. Day one. All right? They added no value. And I'll give you an idea, 50,000 hours of executive time per year in those committees. Not one of the members of those steering committees complained. Not one. We went to a single sponsor. That sponsor could have an advisory board of peers who didn't have voting rights. Single sponsor owning the project and a direct line from the PM to that person. That's agility. Full stop. It works, and it actually takes, as you can see there, 20% off your development costs immediately. Next issue, getting execs to pay attention. Now, we've had a long conversation about tech-savvy executives. I want to talk about a much more interesting executive, a project-savvy executive. All right? They're there fighting fires. Most of you, and many of you CIOs would have the same problem, an average of 4 weeks to even get in their damn diary. So what are they doing? Well, what they're doing is spending most of their time doing business as usual, which of course is not disruptive. A large percentage of the rest of the time is spent sitting on other steering committees, but not their own. All right, we're doing an engagement with another client in Melbourne. That's the biggest complaint from the sponsors, is not the amount of time they spend on their projects, but the amount of time they have to sit in other people's steering committees reading reports that they don't understand and don't read. I'm getting excited, I'll calm down. What we are saying is this. If you go to the single agile model of a single sponsor, supported by peers when they need it, only when they're needed, you can change the amount of time the execs are focused on projects and disruption, if you want to put it that broad, and minimise the amount of time they sit in meetings. So that's the first part of what we're getting to. The next part, and there's just a summary there, you've got a copy of this anyhow. You'll hear these things over the next couple of days, time boxing, continuous development, minimum viable product, risk-based tailoring, very common sense stuff. Most organisations have a one-size-fits-all projects. Have a look at the risks, adjust the models to fit that. Agile is just one of the development paths. I'm too old, 40 years into IT, to get excited about another silver bullet. Agile works. Don't debate that, but it is not the solution. It is part of the solution. Let me now move to a really important aspect, and my colleague Declan to talk about measuring how well you're going.
So just before I do that, I'll just add a little bit to what Rob said. I mean, I was program director for NetBank, and I got weekly access to the head of retail bank. We were able to build that system pretty quickly to a very high standard. I was able to make any decision I needed to make on a day-to-day basis, and then one independent person came in and reviewed every week, who'd you hire, who'd you fire, what decisions you make, and they would report back to the sponsor as well and said, you know, has Declan lost the run of himself? It gave me a rope, but not a very long rope, so if I did anything poorly, basically, you know, it would be addressed. But I was able to make decisions every day, and we built what I still, one of my proudest achievements as a platform. So, agility, we all want to do stuff quicker. Basically, I stopped delivering programs about 2.5 years ago, and I started running the company again. I had a GM running the company before then. And so I had the opportunity to go around and chat to about 20 different clients, and the biggest question I get from clients is, how do we stop this green, although there's a suspicion of red, and red thing happening. So basically a lot of sponsors and CIOs were going, everything was perfect, and now it's a disaster. And basically what we started to look at is what are leading and lagging indicators. So in media, basically Twitter is going to give you an indication pretty quickly what's happening out there. In our business, it's customer satisfaction. The revenue arrives 6 months later. What is it in projects? So basically, you've got PM-based data, you have status reports. Is the project manager strong enough to actually say what's going on? Are they protecting their job? Are they nervous of the sponsor? You've got schedules, basically, but it's a little bit difficult for people to read into those and see what's really going on in the project unless they're a MS Project nerd like myself. So what's the independent data that actually allows people to have a leading indicator? Is their project going wrong? It's not going to fix it for you, but it's going to tell you basically I'm at 200 million, 50 million, whatever's the biggest project in your organization. Is it going to go wrong? Everybody telling me it's fine, but I'm a bit scared. It's a watermelon, red on the inside and green on the outside. So I started to be able to read effectively and thought about independent data in other types of communities. And I read a bit about sabermetrics, which is analysis of in-game baseball statistics. So what it does is it looks to remove the subjective data and basically predict future performance based on the objective data available. I was starting to think about how that could be used in projects. There was a movie made of it as well, which had Brad Pitt in it. So obviously we had very glamorous ideas that we would be the Brad Pitt of it. But the reality was that we were the more nerdy person standing, working our way through the stats. Firstly, we worked out that the data had to be of high quality, because rubbish in, rubbish out. So you can't really tell how programs are going if the quality of your data and your PPM tool or your tools is rubbish. So we built some tools to measure I'm not going to go through this, don't worry, but to measure the quality of the data. This one's looking at schedule. It takes us 2 seconds. We can tell if the schedule's in good nick or not. Once we basically were able to ensure that the quality of data was of high quality, then we started to get some interesting information. If I can point on this one here, I can. So we, again, in a few seconds, we're able to produce task burn downs on the project, and we can do this by release, we can do it by program, we can do it by work stream, we can do it by project. And again, it's a click of a button, it takes a few seconds. So our clients, which include 2 of the top 4 banks, one of the largest insurance companies in Australia, were able to start getting this reporting within seconds on their projects. Task burn down, earned value, are the teams getting through their work each week? This is a bi-week report. How are they going on their critical path? How are they basically going to each of the phases and the milestones? Now, this doesn't replace status reporting. This complements status reporting. So if you're program manager or even your sponsor or whatever level, portfolio manager, whatever level you're dealing with, basically says everything's green, it's going fine, but you get a database view that supports that, that's awesome. If you get a database view that doesn't support that, then you start to get into interesting conversations a lot earlier in the program. We've found programs where everything's green after a month, but are getting through 40% of their work. Now, the critical path might be managed, but there's a tsunami coming because they're just not clearing their work. Getting that addressed in month 1 versus month 9 when it's already too late, our clients have found to be very useful. There's lots of other different views. I'm not going to go through them in any detail around issues and risks and changes and so on and so forth. Even a project predictor tool that assesses what the likely end date of the project is. But effectively, what we're trying to do is we're trying to fill up some independent data that's able to be produced in minutes, or seconds actually, and probably about a day of setup, that actually is going to give you independent database insight of your program to complement, and it is to complement, the PM view of how the program is going. So if you want to move quickly to delivery, you've got to make your organization more agile, but you've also got to spot the problems earlier, and our clients are finding this quite useful in that space. Rob?
I want to back Declan up. He is a nerd.
That's fair.
That's fair enough. I came out of project management, and you do your Gantt and whatever, and do the tracking, and it was all cool as long as you built the relationships. And I met Declan, and he's converted me. About the same time I met Declan, I was given an assignment in a large bank. You can probably figure out. And it was a simple question. And by the way, any CIO in this room, you can answer it anytime you like. It went like this: how much effing money do I get back from my 900 million a year? Now, the effing got dropped and it hit to us. Is that okay? How could you prove that? All right. So we started a journey. And the first thing we found, this is an organisation that has PPM all over the place. Every business case logged into PPM. PM's tracking every week. It took us 7 months to get the data right. So the immediate answer was, we can't tell you, but we're sure it's lots. Because we weren't going to send up crap, is that okay? A year later, we found out. The data quality was mind-blowingly bad. Okay, and where it was all in this one area. So we could find out when projects started and when they finished. We could find out how much they spent on vendors, how much was OPEX, how much was CAPEX. The day it went live, we couldn't tell you anything. So speed to value is not just about accelerating that section on the left. It is moving your focus as a CIO to the right. You want to convince execs that CIOs have a future. Prove to them that for every dollar they give you, you give them 2 back. When Gail Burke was the CIO of Macquarie Bank, she could do that. She's the only CIO I've met in 40 years who could prove that. Then you're not going to have freezes. Why would you not hire someone for every person you hire? They're doubling what you pay them, okay? It's a real strategic advantage. The model is really simple. It's a lot to take in. Basically, the day you go live, a project, this is a very famous model. It's in the book. You can read it anytime you like. This is what we used in this bank to model $1 billion worth of projects. We listed every output that projects were producing the day they went live in the business case. Each of those outputs has a benefit, but the real money is in what those outputs lead to. And the trick with getting on top of benefits is to map that simple 3-figure. That's all it is. We did that for projects up to 500 million in size, 3 boxes. And then ask the question, who's got to do what by when that project goes live? And in almost every case, the people, the who, had not been told, the what had not been agreed to, and the when wasn't there. That leads to a very interesting final point. If you really want to get on top of speed to value, try and start having the conversation with your peers as a CIO about benefits first and costs second. In almost every case, we have the wrong conversation first. What is this going to cost me? All right, and the trick is to say, no, let's not even talk about the cost. Let's talk about what your business outcomes are. Let's talk about the strategy. You know that stuff. Lots of other people talk about it. Monitoring cost, we had this in place by the time we left. We actually started to stop projects, not because they were red because of the budget, but they were red because the benefits had disappeared. In a world that's so disruptive and so quickly transforming itself, you're making assumptions up front about benefits, which are going to shift all the time. So monitoring them both is what it's about. So, and I'm actually right on schedule. I am so excited. I'm looking for feedback from my boss. There's a lot of information in the book. It's large font. I just thought I'd finish with a joke. I'll just leave it and I'll just say, is there any questions? Right, it's all about...
On the last slide,
yeah.
Please, if I can,
yeah,
Rob.
Go to it.
So one of our large banking clients has started doing a lot of this with one of our consultants in terms of actually measuring the benefits at the other end, and I applaud them for it. In fact, they came up with it, but what they were doing aligns very well with what we advocate and basically what Rob advocates as well. It's leading to a lot of very difficult conversations with very senior sponsors that basically are now being assessed a couple of years down the line on their pet projects. So challenging meetings at times, but that is feeding back into those senior executives thinking around current projects they're running, which may not have sufficient benefits anymore, and whether they should shut them down. It's also feeding back into the thinking of new projects coming down the line. I think it will save that organization hundreds of millions of dollars by having those discussions now in future years. Those projects are done projects, that's fine, whatever, it's not going to save that. By having the discussions along the way and assessing benefits every 3 months is allowing projects to be shut down when they should be shut down. I think that, when we talk about speed to value, using our capacity to run dead projects or projects that are no longer relevant to the organization is clearly working against speed to value. Not being able to measure how a project's really going is working against speed to value. And not having a clear, quick relationship between the 2 most important people in the program, which is the project manager and the sponsor, is stopping speed to value. Now in the book, there's another 20 items in there. We can cover so much in 20 minutes, but we wanted to leave you with those thoughts at least. Any questions?
Declan, can I go back? Sorry, just to make that last point, because it picks up on what Luke was saying. On the most surprising thing is running into these processes and these values and behaviours that have been embedded in organisations for 30 years. And I cannot obviously overemphasise how hard it is to confront those. Every time we won something, we lost something. So you're going to go down this journey, you're facing the real blunt end of disruption. It's not about wanting to disrupt, it's about these embedded processes and these bureaucrats and these process fanatics that I kept running into every day who said, you know, we have a competency problem, so let's have a form for it. You know, rather than having obviously the conversation around raising competency. Anyway, questions?
You need process, lightweight process, but you need really good people. Invest more in fewer people.
2 minutes.
Questions, anybody? No? It's obviously all self-explanatory. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you
and
very
if anybody's
much.
any questions later, happy to answer them. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, folks.